Okay, awesome. So we're here with Rachael Ardanuy, who is a cannabis attorney. She works with businesses in the cannabis industry here in Colorado. So we have a lot of cool things to talk about. And I think the first thing we should jump right in on is the name, because people call it marijuana, weed, cannabis, THC. You hear all these terms thrown around. What is the official name, and what is the thing we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of confusion around it. Cannabis sativa is the Latin term for the name of the plant. The term marijuana came about when really as a political term, and that's how it's referred to in a lot of laws. It's how it's referred to in the Controlled Substances Act, and there's many different spellings for marijuana, so it's confusing. But the typical understanding and feeling about those words is cannabis is the more acceptable and accurate term for the name of the plant. But when it comes to cannabis, there's a lot of different strains. The two main cannabinoids that we hear about in cannabis is THC and CBD. THC is the psychoactive element in marijuana, and CBD is non-psychoactive, and we're learning a lot of health benefits about CBD. And it's in the news, we're hearing a lot about CBD. And then again, like you said, there's cannabis, hemp, marijuana. So typically marijuana is referred to as strains of cannabis that have more than 0.3% THC in it. So industrial hemp consists of strains of marijuana that has less than that. It has very, very little of the psychoactive component in it, and it's what's used for textiles, for for extractions of oil, and a lot of CBD comes from both of those strains, but the plant itself is cannabis.
Okay, so we've got cannabis up here, right, and then underneath that marijuana, hemp, and everything else, and that's sort of based on the different, what are we calling these? Are these different substances, different chemicals?
Yeah, there are different compounds that are part of the plant, and so THC is typically, when we extract these compounds, THC is the compound that has the psychoactive effects, and also is being shown in more and more medical studies to have significant medical effects as well.
Right.
And so that all still remains to be seen. There's a lot of research going on to determine what the effects are and benefits.
What it all does. I know, that's the
right.
So much to be learned.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's had a story, I think, whether it's a personal story, a friend, family, colleague, of how marijuana has impacted their life, or CBD or cannabis, however you want to refer to it. But we are hearing a lot more and more in the news about CBD, how it's being treated. Most recently, the FDA approved the very first drug that involves CBD from the cannabis plant. And so we're in a real legal gray area when it comes to that.
And that's sort of what I want to get into next is, let's start on the federal level, right? How does the federal government differentiate between, recreational use marijuana and other parts of the plant itself? I know there are seeds, stems,
right,
like the leaves. How is this all dealt with right now?
There's a lot of confusion. It's not dealt very well with right now, but we're getting there. We're moving. We are progressing and moving toward a better way of dealing with this. But the Controlled Substances Act has defined portions of the plant that they consider to be illegal. And to make it very clear, under the Controlled Substances Act, which is the federal law.
And still in effect.
Still in effect, okay. And CBD is considered a Schedule I drug because it is a derivative of marijuana, which is an illegal plant under the CSA. So, we hear a lot, we see a lot of articles out there saying CBD is legal in every state, it's legal everywhere if it comes from hemp. That's just not true. But we do see the federal government exercising some discretion in prosecuting people, especially in light of the fact that we're learning of all the benefits that people are gaining from it. So again, we're still sort of at a crossroads right now. It's definitely been a big benefit, and this just happened within the past month, where the FDA has approved this drug that includes CBD in it. And so that is derived directly from marijuana, or cannabis rather, and is not a synthetic. And so I think we're moving in the right direction, but unfortunately it's a political matter.
Right.
Luckily it's an issue though that seems to cross partisan lines, and it's gained a lot of support in the public and on both sides of the aisle. So I think we're going to be seeing some more progress in this area.
I think so too. And this is really something that I've heard a lot of. Everyone saying CBD is legal, but when you read that definition of marijuana in the Controlled Substances Act, the CBD doesn't come from the mature stalk, right? It comes from like the leaves and it's the resins still. So technically that has not really been dealt with, right?
Right.
Or legalized.
Right. I mean, we're sort of getting into the science of it,
Okay.
but it is pretty much universally agreed upon that CBD, the bulk of CBD, does not come from those portions of the plant that are exempt.
Right.
Because of the Farm Bill in 2014, and then the new one that's being considered in Congress right now for 2018, there was an expansion of the ability to grow industrial hemp within states. And so, for example, in Colorado, a company that is in compliance with our industrial hemp pilot program here can legally sell CBD and hemp-derived products within the state, and the DEA the Department of Justice doesn't have a budget to go after those clients.
Right, they basically just shut off their funding to prosecute those, right?
Right, but the gray area and the issue that is unquestionably illegal, but whether or not it's something that the federal government's prosecuting is it crossing state lines.
Right, and that's sort of what I want to ask, because I've been in hemp CBD shops,
Right.
and people will ask the person working there, who I don't think is an attorney, can I fly home with this? They always say yes, but to me that always seems maybe not like the best advice.
Right. There is no good answer on that, other than, strictly speaking, it is illegal under the under the Controlled Substances Act. I've seen some guidance out there. I understand that the TSA issued some guidance. The TSA's job, though, is not drug interdiction. It's safety and security, because they're part of Department of Homeland Security. So even their guidance isn't really spot on.
Right.
So it's a challenge, but I mean, it's really all of it is a question of, on the spectrum, what the potential risks are.
Right.
But at the end of the day, as an attorney, I have to advise that technically illegal.
Still illegal.
Correct.
So I think that leads well into the question of running a business in this space. Since moving to Colorado, I get a sense a lot of people in the space thought this was sort of a get-rich-quick scheme based on how much revenue is coming in.
Right.
But I'm assuming that's not quite how things are working. What are some of the challenges these business owners are facing?
Sure, there's a number of uphill battles that marijuana businesses face in Colorado. First of all, I would say banking and the ability to get financing and investors is a real challenge. So, I'm not just saying that these businesses aren't available to get business loans. They can't even get checking accounts, depositories for their cash, which creates unnecessary problems and safety concerns because of being so cash heavy. So that's definitely a big issue, is the banking issue and ability to capitalize your company. The next issue would be the tax burden. So the federal tax
This is
code,
something not a lot of people know about, I don't think.
Right. They just like you said, it's everyone sees it sort of as a green rush, but that's sort of the top level number.
Right.
Gross profits may look outstanding, but because marijuana is still a Scheduled I drug under the Controlled Substances Act, it's considered an illegal drug. And so the tax code basically says that if you're trafficking in an illegal substance, you're not allowed to take any typical business deductions other than the costs of goods sold. So what does that mean? It means that any other typical business costs you may have, if you have to travel for business, if you're going on, meetings with clients to a restaurant or something like that, if you are paying rent in your dispensary, none of those things are directly related to the costs of selling the goods. And so those businesses have to pay taxes on the gross amount that they're bringing in. So although they may be making a lot of money, they're paying a lot of money, well above and beyond what a typical business would pay in federal taxes. Luckily, on the state level here in Colorado, we have state taxes as well. And Colorado has done away with the similar provision that they formerly had with regard to marijuana. So at least for their state tax returns, they can write off business deductions, but not for their federal taxes.
Which is the big one.
It's such a conundrum. It's like, well, marijuana companies, we're going to let you, make the money that you're making, but we're not going to let you put it in a bank. And then you're going to have to pay all the money in taxes, and the government can put it in the treasury, and they can put it in their bank, and landlords can put their rent for marijuana companies in their bank accounts. But the marijuana companies themselves can't.
Well, there are so many contradictions in this space, which I think is just something that's always bothered me about it. It shows a real sort of weakness in, government reality. Let's just treat it the way.
It's pretty unique.
Be realistic about it. Yeah.
Right. It's pretty unique, and that's why I feel pretty passionately about dedicating my career to this.
Right. Well, let's jump in. What brought you to this?
I practiced law in Florida, completely unrelated areas of law. And I moved to Colorado. My husband and I had friends and family here, and we just really loved the atmosphere here. So I took a bar exam out here and moved here, and I just serendipitously was introduced to another cannabis attorney. And I said, well, if I'm moving across the country and reinventing my life, I may as well reinvent my practice areas too. Yeah. Right. So I was a member of NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, back in college, and it's always something I've sort of been behind. And so when presented with the opportunity to enter this area of law, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I've been doing it since 2015, and exclusively working with cannabis businesses. So I work with hemp companies here as well, not just licensed marijuana businesses. And it's something I can get behind.
Yeah, it's super interesting as well. A question that I wanted to get to, mostly for my own curiosity, these cannabis businesses registered in Colorado, are they sort of fully recognized by the state? Like, can people sort of sue them in civil court? Is that sort of standardized now, or are there different issues there?
That's a great question. Yeah, they are legitimate businesses here in the state. Every marijuana business has a secretary, they can get a certificate of good standing with the Secretary of State. They're all registered either LLCs or corporations or some other legitimate business entity. They all have EIN numbers from the IRS. They all have to pay taxes at the state and local, sometimes local, but state and federal level. And yes, they absolutely can be sued in court. We see a lot of, in my transactional work, working with preparing contracts and things, there's a lot of alternative dispute resolution terms in there because folks a lot of times don't want to go to court. They feel like it's a lot less in the limelight. But Colorado has been really progressive in this area. In fact, we have a statute that's codified that says that contracts are not void or voidable just because they have something to do with marijuana. So we have a law that specifically says, well, you can't just throw out a contract because it deals with marijuana, because this is legitimate industry here in the state. So you typically we see if there are disputes that get to court, it's in state court. Folks typically are not going to federal court over this.
Well, that's my question. If if I'm in another state, is it sort of advantageous to try and bring them to federal court? How do the federal courts, have you seen that push, or has everyone pretty much stayed out of?
People have pretty much they've stayed out of federal, although breaking news, today is the 8th
I think so.
Of August. Today there was the very first patent infringement case filed in federal court this morning for a cannabis patent infringement case, and it was filed here in the Federal District of Colorado.
So that's another thing I've been curious about. You can get patent protection. You can't get bankruptcy protection?
Right. You can get patent protection, but you can't get a trademark.
Yeah.
And they're from the same office, the United States
Really?
Patent
So all
and
these
Trademark
businesses out
Office.
here just can't get trademark protection, or they can get local, I'm assuming?
So the state of Colorado offers trademark registrations. So you can get a registration for the state of Colorado. And if you were to talk to any other IP attorney, they would tell you that, there is the common law trademark protection for the area in which you've been selling in the stream of commerce. But no, you cannot get a federal trademark for a marijuana brand specifically. So typically what we see is brands sort of nibbling around the edge is what they call it. So they'll get a trademark for their brand for clothing or for smokers articles or for educational materials, but not for the brand or the product itself.
So I know 420 is going to be, there's going to be like a mad rush when
we'll
when
see.
it's legalized.
Yeah, they'll be duking it out for sure.
Yeah. So then I want to sort of like step back a little bit and look at sort of the industry overall. And I think we'll talk about two different things here. One is this issue of transitioning from sort of pre-legalization to the current state, where there's a lot of tension because some people are in jail for selling weed, some people are not, and we're just allowed to sort of go right into their legitimate business.
Right.
And there's this issue. I know that in Colorado, we have the MED, the Marijuana Enforcement Division. They're tasked with writing all the rules and regulations. There's some issue with felony. If you have a felony, you're not allowed to participate. Can you discuss that issue?
Sure. So there are specific requirements that you have to meet in order to be eligible to be an owner of a marijuana company. So one thing that's different from marijuana companies than any other company is maybe in other companies you can have a silent partner. But you can't really have that in a marijuana company because the Marijuana Enforcement Division wants to vet every single person who's benefiting from this industry. And so if you have a felony that's not drug related, you have to have finished not just the sentencing, but any sort of punishment. So if you were on probation for 10 years, the date of your last day of probation or last day of incarceration, whenever the case got fully wrapped up, you have to wait 5 years. And if it was drug related, then it's 10 years. Correct. So, there is a disparity because we are very well aware of the disparity in charging for crimes in this country. And so it unfortunately has caused a very large barrier of entry for a lot of folks who previously had charges. One thing we're seeing in other states across the country, because it's slowly legalizing across the country, some states are putting out rules and new laws that allow for immediate expungement of cases, which is excellent. Colorado doesn't have automatic expungements, and there's still limitations on what charges can get expunged that are marijuana related, but it's definitely a huge help and benefit to folks who were previously have charges regarding marijuana, and now that it's legal, but the states are definitely grappling with that. Colorado didn't just release all the folks who were in jail for marijuana.
There's still people in jail for marijuana related crimes.
Right.
It's just crazy. And then if you look at the statistics, I don't remember what they are, but minority-owned cannabis businesses, it's like shockingly low. Maybe around 1% or so. And
that's for a number of reasons. Partly because of the issue of, the barrier of entry for criminal backgrounds and the disparity of charging of minority groups in the past and currently. Another piece is financing. Because these marijuana companies don't really have access to traditional business loans. They have to rely on a network and investors, and a lot of times those folks are just not in the same circles of folks who are willing to invest with them.
Right, these are all very sort of private companies still on
Absolutely.
The local level.
Yeah, in fact, we had a law passed this past legislative session that would have allowed publicly traded companies to enter the market, and that was vetoed by the governor.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That leads well into the next question, which is sort of, where do you think we are on the timeline? What is the state of things in Colorado, and should we look forward to anything happening on the federal level anytime soon?
Sure. I think we're in a good spot in Colorado. Things are slowly trudging forward. I'm also licensed in Florida, and Florida legalized their medical marijuana program in 2016, so it's still kind of a baby program there. And I'm sort of seeing where Colorado was, 15 or 10 years ago, where Florida is now. They're trying to reinvent the wheel. They're not looking to other states. So I think Colorado, we've done a good job. There is an element of some over-regulation or maybe lack of regulation in certain areas, but it's certainly moving forward. And again, it's a pretty nonpartisan issue here in this state. At the federal level, every year there's legislation trying to make some progress in this area. It formerly wasn't as popular, but now that it is such a popular topic amongst voters, I think that regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, this is really an issue that is going to impact a lot of folks, especially in light of health concerns or.
Totally. I mean, the medicinal benefits alone justify some movement on this front.
Yeah, arguably yes.
Yeah.
And so, and I think the major institutions are getting there. Like I said, the FDA just approved a drug with CBD in it. The DEA has been slowly but surely moving in that direction, and we just need to get our politicians on board.
I know. Vote for the right people.
Right.
Yeah.
Vote.
Cool. I think, is there anything else you want to talk about, sort of about your business in this interview, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a big part of my job is educating folks, ideally before they come up with their excellent plan. I hear so many great novel ideas for the industry, but it's best to sort of know what you can and can't do before you come up with these excellent plans, so we can make sure that they fit within the rules and regulations, like you said, that the Marijuana Enforcement Division requires. So I think just a big preliminary planning step before going full steam ahead to get investors and things of that nature, talking to someone who has experience in the industry and have seen companies succeed and fail, and getting some guidance is definitely, worth it. Yes, it's a little bit of money outlay at the beginning, but, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Folks have really sunk a lot of money into some ideas that are just not going to work because based on what our regulations limit. And so that's what I try to help folks with.
Yeah, I think that's just a good business point overall, which is, it's awesome to have the idea, but then you sort of have to strategize a little bit. And in the marijuana field or the cannabis industry, there's more things. I think a lot of people think it's, based on the culture, it's an easier industry.
Right.
There are probably, higher barriers to entry than maybe any other industry right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much regulation. And what I tend to see is two major camps in the industry right now. And those are those who are very passionate about the plant. And like you said, maybe they were involved in the industry before it got legalized. And then there are those who are more business oriented and see it as an opportunity for, a great business venture, but maybe have no real experience with cannabis or cannabis regulations. And so that sometimes becomes a challenge because, sometimes I'll encounter a very successful business person in their separate field, but those successes, are not going to translate directly to the marijuana industry because things just can't be done in the same fashion. So I think that tends to be a challenge on my end, but I try my best to educate folks, regardless of what background they come from, to say, these are the proper steps to put in place in order to get where you want to go as quickly as possible and successfully as possible and without running into any pitfalls.
Right, so it's doable, but it really requires some planning.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just just a little bit of effort on the front end is really going to save you on the back end, especially, when we just talked about the tax issue. Talking to an accountant who has experience with the 280E issue and has helped businesses from the get-go and seen how businesses get in trouble at the back end, just being able to structure that properly in the beginning can really save a ton of money and headache and problems on the back end when the audits come down the road.
Right, which is something we've discussed before. When you use professionals, it gets done right the first time, and then it's a huge save long term. I want to touch on one more thing. Like, let's say, all right, sure. I'm running my business. I'm like dedicated to make my cannabis business happen. What's the deal with the licenses at MED? And what should I be concerned with if my buddy has, like, let's say, a DUI and we're partners?
That's a great question. Yeah. So Colorado is a dual licensing state. So in order to operate a cannabis business, you have to have a license issued from the state licensing authority, which is the Marijuana Enforcement Division, and then a license as well from the local government. For instance, the city of Denver. There's a lot of local governments because the constitutional amendment allowed local governments to say, we're not allowing that here. So the first step in deciding to start your company is, where are we going to be located? Because we have to be able to get a local license. Some localities maybe allow marijuana businesses, but maybe they put a cap on the number of licenses. Or maybe they're issued a moratorium and they're not issuing licenses right now. And so, being able to navigate that piece is a preliminary step to even getting started. So, there are different there are a few different types of licenses you can apply for here in Colorado. You could be a cultivator, so growing cannabis plants. You could be an infused products manufacturer, so making edibles and tinctures, things of that nature. You can be a dispensary. Those are the only licensees that can sell to the public. Everyone else has to wholesale to a dispensary. And then there are a few other licensees, like a testing lab, because we do require pesticide and residual solvent testing on cannabis before it can be sold. There's an operator license, so those are for the folks. Yeah, that's a new one, and that's actually pretty important because, like I talked about earlier, there's a lot of business people who are entering the industry because they see it as a great business venture, but maybe they have no experience in cannabis. So now there are some operators that will come in and help operate the facility for you, so that way they take care of that knowledge component and take that load off of the owners. So that's one. There's a courier license. So there's a few different opportunities in the industry to become a licensed part of the industry. And then keep in mind, another big segment of my clients are ancillary businesses, because if you think about it, for every $1 spent on cannabis, $2 are spent on the ancillary services. So who is that? Packagers, marketers, third-party brokers. I mean, there's so many smart, novel, interesting business ideas that people are bringing to the industry that aren't actually touching the plant. So there's just a lot of opportunity, and like I said, in doing my consultations with folks,
no, but it sounds like people,
ideas.
It's a really good idea for someone to come talk to you just to figure out what category they fall under.
Where they stand,
because they're probably going to need something, right?
Yeah, quite literally yesterday I had a woman call me who said she wanted to get a license because she helps grow facilities and infused manufacturers find each other and buy and sell raw ingredients to one another. That there is no license for that currently, but there are ways that she can provide services that are going to be compliant for her clients who are licensed businesses. So that's something I'm helping her with her sales contracts, things like that, because again, this industry, you mentioned earlier, are these companies that can be sued. Yes, they can be sued. And so one way I like to protect my clients from lawsuits is to say, let's make some ironclad contracts, because you can protect yourself. It doesn't have to just be a handshake and then you get burned on something and you have no recourse.
I know, and I think it's really about educating the industry now that there is a process to doing a lot of these things, because I think pre-legalization, the people, they had no.
There was no recourse.
There was no recourse. So it was all handshakes,
operating in the shadows,
like and you really had to rely on people And now that it's becoming a much larger, geographic spread, people are going to have to learn how to use the system properly.
It's legitimizing a formerly illegitimate industry, which our country does not have a lot of experience with. So it's a learning process for my clients. It's a learning process for the regulators.
Really
we're all sort of figuring this out together. But I consider us pretty fortunate here in Colorado because we have gotten a bit of a grip on most of the issues that the industry faces.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for joining us.
My
I hope
pleasure.
we can talk more in the future. I hope there's a lot more to update us on.
Every day. Excellent.
Cool. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.